Not really.
And we're good?
And we're good.
So I will call the special meeting of the Irvington Board of Trustees for the Irvington Firehouse presentation. And I will ask everyone to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, so please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, this is an evening that I've been looking forward to for a while, maybe since like 1997 or so. When before I was on the Board of Trustees, I was a member of the fire department. I'm still technically a member of the fire department, but I think for probably a decade before I joined, which is now a couple decades ago, everyone realized that the building was not up to the OSHA, PESH standards, the NFPA, whatever standards you kind of looked at, the building was not up to them. Being, firefighters, they overcame the obstacles and they made it work. They've done an unbelievable job making it work for, 50 years now. My guess is that building was almost obsolete when it was finished, but with the current size of apparatus, the changing training demands, the different things that they train for now, it's obviously not just firefighting, but the lack of showers, and there's a million things that you're going to hear about later. But this has been a long time coming. We did we started this exercise kind of for real. When was the first study done?
2009?
2009. Yeah.
Around there.
Yeah.
If you can even call it a study.
From the fire department to the Board of Trustees.
Yeah.
But that's still a long time ago. I think we were all a little disappointed that there wasn't kind of easy was never going to be the solution, but a financially viable solution that I think we found out that it was much more expensive than we thought, and it didn't accomplish all of our goals. So I think we kind of went into a phase where we said, why don't we look if there's other alternatives around the village? But as we know, in Irvington, it's pretty much built out. There's not lots of space. We did reach out to the Columbia University for their property to see if they had any usable space for us. They did not, at least for them. And so we said this isn't something we just keep punting there, kicking that can down the road. So we, re-engaged our architects and asked them to find a potential solution. I think this board showed that it's very committed to getting this done by actually buying the adjacent piece of property, which we think is kind of the bare minimum of what we need to get anything done that is viable. That was one of the reasons the last project we didn't have enough square footage to get everything that was just kind of mandated, not nice to haves, but just must haves. So that was, to me, a big step. And with that kind of under our belt, we said, let's look at this again. And then obviously we've had COVID and a million other things, but we've had a great team working with, the fire department, with the village administrator and the building department. And tonight is the big reveal. So, it's not quite Property Brothers because they can't get it done in one episode, but we hope that this is the first episode that, that sets us on the path. And, I'm excited to turn it over to Larry to not just talk in generalities, but give some specifics.
We'll definitely get into some specifics for sure. So thank you for that introduction, and thanks for scheduling this special meeting for us. I think it's an important topic, as you outlined, and we really want to present to the board what we've been working on for some time now. As you said, the plans for this Irvington Firehouse expansion have been on the drawing board for many years. You said 2009. It probably goes back further in people's minds as well. But before we get into the history, what I'd like to do is have the members of the fire department, the leadership here, to give you an idea of exactly why we're talking about this. What led us to needing to consider expanding this facility and improving the facility. I mean, why we've been talking about it for 15 plus years. So with that, Chief, yeah. And anyone else that you want?
All right. So to push this?
No, you're on. You're on.
Okay.
Yep.
So first of all, thank you guys for meeting with us. It's a tremendous honor. Thank you, Larry, architects, and Ed for meeting with us. Larry as well. It's been a long time coming. We just wanted to get into reasons why our existing building is not up to code standard anywhere you look at it. So I'm not going to get too specific, but just want to do some broad strokes. So our apparatus bays, currently where they are now, are unsafe. They're very narrow. Our membership really doesn't have any room for error when it comes to packing up our trucks right now. And one thing I think, Mayor Smith brought up too was over the years, as you buy apparatus, they're becoming larger and larger. So with that said, and the future plans of possibly our ladder being replaced, that's another aspect why we need wider bays. Okay. When it also comes to our bays too, I'm sure a lot of people have been in our firehouse where we store our gear, is literally right next to diesel exhaust. So as members come in to go on our fire call, they turn on the truck, the driver turns on the truck. There's members in the back, whether they're going on the first rig or the second rig, are taking in diesel exhaust as they're getting dressed as the trucks are coming out. So not to get too specific, but that's not NFPA compliant 1851. You have to have your gear storage in a separate area, in a separate room. So right now, we're making do with what we have in the space we have. That's where, widening the bays and also expanding, I would say, to the south towards our backyard there is a must. The radio room. So where our radio room is now, you can only see where engine 178 is, which is the first truck on the right. If you guys don't know, you can't see our secondary engine 177, our ladder, or our rescue. It's especially important if someone's in the radio room and they have to communicate with either the chiefs on the scene or dispatch, and how we respond accordingly. Who's on the trucks, who's not on the trucks, and who's coming in. So that view is extremely important. Overall, throughout the firehouse, there is a lack of storage. So currently, most of our excess equipment maintenance stuff is stored in a shed out back that's obviously subject to weather. So that deteriorates our equipment that possibly could last longer. So that makes purchasing other equipment a little more cost. We want it to be cost effective.
By the way, it's very expensive equipment. I mean,
Yeah,
so you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in a $1,000 shed, which is clearly not ideal.
Especially, like you said, fire hose. So most of our spare hose, which we have to have for obvious reasons, is stored in that rear shed.
The shed's locked, right?
Yes.
Yes.
We have a nice double master lock. Yeah, exactly. But I'll tell you, even if the weather's bad, just going out there and getting equipment is brutal. So we also, if people don't know what a cascade is, so that's to basically an air compressor to refill our air bottles. Okay, so that's basically sitting right next to our rescue truck, our makeshift decon area, which is a sink and a washing machine. So there's literally no space for it. It's literally sitting next to where our rescue is, and we have our utility, which is our gator. It literally sits right next to it. And that's also not compliant with NFPA. NFPA 1852, that you need a dedicated filling, inspection, testing, and repair of SCBA area. So like I said, it's just basically being in a common area. And then above it sits our Marine 44, which is our Zodiac if we ever have to go to Walsh's Pond or Irvington Reservoir to make a rescue. With that said, when I mentioned the washer and dry area, there's no area really to maintain or clean our equipment. So obviously we keep talking about deteriorating our equipment. And this is another area where we need space, a proper location to do so. And along the lines of our storage. So besides the back shed, we have AV equipment in our shower. And our spare fire extinguishers are in a shower downstairs. We'd like an area for our membership to have the ability to shower if they need be. But literally we have no storage right now. So we have a microphone, our speakers that we use often. for whatever events we have in the village. And we also have to have spare fire extinguishers. Obviously, if we use one on a call, it has to be replaced right away. We can't have that on order. That has to be replaced right away. So that's where we store that equipment. As far as another area for what we talked about, the Cascade, our sinking area in the back of where the rescue is, we have no decon area. Okay? So NFPA, again, 1851, says you have to have a dedicated decontamination area. We physically don't have that. If we had a hazmat incident, whether it's in our town or outside of our town, we'd have to have some sort of makeshift decon area that we'd have to set up outside our facility. You have to have a dedicated decon area, and right now we just don't have that. So that's another concern. Training. So I'm proud to say, as chief, that we do go use Westchester County DES, Department of Emergency Services, very often. We were there last night. We do train there on live fire. We do many different things over there, whether it's cutting holes in roofs, whether it's stretching hose lines, doing searches, different things like that. But there are things that we need to do in-house. For instance, we do our mass confidence training in-house, and we're doing that on our apparatus base. We have to have some sort of area or a larger space to do those things, whether it's more space to, if all the trucks are to the left, or more space to the right, in which I think the architect can get into in a little bit. But we're literally doing training on our apparatus base. We have to pull out the trucks and then figure stuff out from there. And as far as administrative area, I figured this out the hard way since being chief. There's literally, I'm upstairs basically in a large closet doing paperwork. And as you know, being chief or an assistant chief in this department, it's not just going on fire calls. There's obviously a lot more to it and a lot more time spent on it. As far as, working with you guys who have been excellent. But, you have to pay bills. There's different things that to do, set up trainings, etc. And basically right now we're operating out of like a large closet basically. And a lot of storage tends to just fall there. And genuinely, I like to be an organized type of leader, and it's very tough to, because that just became another storage area. So those are broad strokes as far as what are musts and what needs to be done. And I'll leave the rest up to the architects, Larry and Ed. But if you guys have any questions, we're here. We're always available. And just want to commend Larry. You've been an excellent liaison as well. So it's been a pleasure working with you. So.
I just wanted to add one thing, that the fire department pretty much never asks the village for anything. I think your budget's the same every year. It's probably been within a couple $1,000s for the last, since I've been on the board, which is since 2009. So I just want the public to know that our fire department, and obviously we've been dealing with this building for decades. This isn't like the boy who cries wolf, and they keep asking for things because they want to have it, or because Tarrytown has 6 firehouses or whatever. They almost to a fault don't ask for help. They figure out ways to get things to work. So again, this isn't like you guys are asking for a palace. You're asking for kind of the basics. And I just want to put that context out there, that this isn't a department that's constantly asking us for the newest equipment, and you have to have it because it's a cool toy, which would be very tempting as firefighters, to be honest. But that's definitely not the case. I honestly don't think you've ever asked for a budget increase. I think Jimmy Ruffler once asked if you could move some money from like a equipment line to a training line, something like that, and the fact that even you'd ask that is impressive to me. But you're just not that kind of department that's asking for things. So this is the first time you've ever asked us for anything. I just wanted to put that out there, so that overall kind of set the tone. This isn't like the 38th time you've been in here the last 2 years asking us for something. This is it.
I agree. And even when it comes to larger items that we do have to purchase, we're just trying to be as practical as possible and get equipment that fits our village's needs and our surrounding communities for mutual aid.
And if you look at the trucks, you almost couldn't tell how old they are because you maintain them so well. And I think you guys take pride in all your equipment, and everything you get, you treat like gold. So
there's someone out there power washing right now.
You know, one thing I just want to add, first of all, you know, thank you guys, thank the committee and really all of the fire department. You know, a lot of what you've talked about are really safety issues here. And they're obviously the single most important, you know, reason that we need to be thinking about this. But also fiscally, I mean, you talked about new equipment, you talked about trucks. My understanding is every time up until now, because of the status quo, every time a truck is purchased, there's an additional cost, probably 25%. Is that a good estimate as to what's?
Depends on the truck.
What it
It
costs.
depends on if it's an engine, a rescue,
Yeah.
or a ladder.
Right, well, the last one I can remember, and I believe it was about 20 to 25% more cost to get less vehicle, because we had to make the truck shorter to be able to fit into the existing, you know, area. So there's a financial reason for this as well. You know, that cost is tremendous. You know, trucks last a long time, but they do have to get purchased. So not only this major safety reasons and safety issues, but also a fiscal reason to be doing this.
So I know they have their inspection coming up in a few weeks, but I think, and that's to see how great everything is, and it always is. But I do think if you have any questions about any of these conditions, they'd be happy to show you what they're talking
Oh,
about.
absolutely.
Especially the one about the trucks being so close together. It's actually unnerving to stand in between the however many foot tall trucks and picture them tearing out of the firehouse while you're standing there.
You literally can't have two doors open at the same time.
Yeah,
Like
it's-
178,
it's-
177, you can't have two doors at the same
You,
time.
you don't understand it until you stand there. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, just to open.
Yeah, no,
I'm
absolutely,
sure.
it's an open invitation to all you guys. Anytime.
Can I bring my son?
Absolutely. You do that as well.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chief.
Thanks.
Thanks,
So,
Thank you very much.
so like I mentioned in the beginning, I wanted to get into a little bit of the history now that you understand, you know, why we've started talking about it these many years ago. The project has been on the drawing board since 2009. In 2009, it was really the first time there was any tangible movement on the project. We were in the aftermath of the fiscal crisis of 2008-9, and the availability of federal stimulus money, which I guess is getting fairly routine. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the ARRA, many of you may remember, had a program called Fire Station Construction Grant, which is offered through FEMA. We had done no analysis of what our needs were. We had no plans on the drawing board other than maybe what was in people's heads. And we scrambled to put together an application, which we did. And as you can imagine, it wasn't funded. And it probably shouldn't have been, to be honest. But that was the first time that we actually made movement on this in a positive way. After that, we kind of regrouped, and the board was supportive of doing it what I would call the right way, which is to hire an expert, which we did at the time, an expert in fire station construction, an architect who conducted a full needs analysis with the members of the department. Some of the people in this room were probably there and worked on it, maybe some weren't. But it resulted in a full analysis of what spatial needs they needed, what areas were deficient and such. It took till about 2014 when a draft report was put together. It was never formally released to the public, and part of the reason is because the conclusion was that it was an unworkable conclusion. The conclusion was that if you were going to build what was needed at the time, it would have needed to be done on the existing parcel. If that's all you had was the existing parcel, it would have been 3.5 stories tall and 55 feet tall. It was, and it would have cost in dollars of 2014, it was budgeted at about $10 million. So it was really an unworkable plan. The report recommended that alternate sites be looked at, or if an alternate site couldn't be located, that additional real estate adjacent to the existing parcel be utilized to try to spread out, to eliminate the 55-foot tall structure that would have needed to be built, that no one wanted, by the way. So we spent from 2014 really until 2019 exploring alternate sites. The mayor mentioned a specific site on Broadway. We had a couple of others on Broadway that we looked at. None of them really, first of all, none of them were on the market. That's the first thing. So it would have been an eminent domain thing, which would have been a little bit difficult, expensive. And so no other alternate sites were located. We had many attempts, especially with Columbia University, I think, as Brian mentioned, but we couldn't close anything. In the fall of 2019, 86 Main Street was put on the market, which is the property immediately to the west of the existing fire station. That idea about acquiring that was floated to the board at the time, and frankly, very quickly, they authorized the purchase of that, which is, a pretty bold step. But I think knowing the struggles of trying to find an alternate location and not being able to for many years, knowing those struggles, I think they recognized, and we all certainly recognized, that having that piece of property next to the existing firehouse really unlocked our ability to build a workable facility that wasn't 55 feet high, frankly. So March 2020, 86 Main Street was acquired, a little over $1 million. At that point, to be perfectly honest, very little was done on that project. We bought it in March of 2020. We went right into the pandemic, and we didn't think about it, frankly, at all. Well, we were thinking about it, but we certainly didn't advance it. So it took until late in 2021 for us to bring this back to the board. We asked the board to authorize the hiring of an architect to update the needs analysis that was done in 2014. We thought it needed a bit of a refresh. And so that's where we hired Sullivan Architecture, who is here tonight, obviously, is going to present what they found. But, they now could take into account whatever the updated needs were of the fire department and fit them more appropriately into a site that now included 86 Main Street. The plan, as you've known from the beginning, the plan is to raise the building that's there on 86 Main Street in order to spread out and build this facility that we'll talk about tonight. So that's an overview of the history. I don't know how many of you knew all that, but you do now. So it's been a long one for sure. So with that, I'd like to introduce our architects, John Sullivan and Carl Ackerman. And as I said, they've been meeting since the beginning of this year, really with the members of the fire department, with village staff, myself and Ed Marin. And I think you'll find that I think they did a good job of balancing, the needs that they heard from the department with the space that we have available. And hopefully you'll agree. So if you want to, we can get set up here. Yeah, have a seat up here, or however you want to present. I'm gonna pull up their plan for the screen, and you can either work off the screen or sit here, however you want to do it. You tell me. But let's see here. Whoops.
While Larry's setting that up, as introduction, I am John Sullivan, president of Sullivan Architecture. My first associate here, Carl Ackerman, architect. Just a little background, where our offices are located in White Plains. We've been in business for almost 40 years. Yes, I'm that old. Don't like admitting that, but in any event. And we're quite familiar with Irvington. We've been here before, we've worked here before, and continue to do so. Firehouses have been one of our typical building types. If you're not aware, locally, going back quite a number of years, I was the architect for Dobbs Ferry Village Hall when we incorporated the Village Hall addition as well as the fire departments. We did the new Ardsley Firehouse. I don't know, you know what, I bet you that's almost 10 years now, kind of hard to believe. We're currently just finishing the Bedford Village's new firehouse. We did Banksville's firehouse out in Banksville. 2 firehouses in Poughkeepsie, the Blauvelt Firehouse. So just naming a few, hence why Larry called us and asked us if we would work with you guys. We obviously have an understanding of firematic facilities, some of the things that the chief pointed out to you that we typically find ourselves bringing to departments. For example, the need for cascade rooms and the need for decontamination areas, the spatial requirements between apparatus and other equipment, et cetera. So these gentlemen are quite aware of that, and as you heard, and so it made finding solutions here for us and for them quite well. Carl, particularly, more so than I, worked very closely with these guys and with Larry and with Ed, the building inspector, and looked at this property and the existing building, and we can show you here what we've looked at. We've also included, by the way, as part of our service, we brought in, because we were making some recommendations that had some pretty significant structural requirements. So we spoke with our structural engineer to make certain that we weren't somewhere way out in left field with what we were doing, that it was at least something achievable reasonably. And while obviously we've not achieved a complete design, we like to consider this a conceptual design, mostly attacking and looking at the program requirements that we were given. Clearly, hopefully, with your direction, we'll get into further design work later on and clarify a lot of this. But at least you can see that from what these gentlemen believe are their needs, from what we've been able to establish here, that we've made a pretty good stride toward achieving their goals. Carl, why don't you run through this? As you can see, I'll just quickly say here that the bottom drawing is a site plan. The schematic as it is, you can see where Main Street, the corner there, sort of light, I guess it's kind of a tannish yellowish color. That's the footprint of the existing building. And the sort of light gray bluish area, L-shaped around it, is the suggested addition to the building. And yes, it includes, and maybe you want to point to it, Carl, it includes the site that has the existing house on it right there. So we're utilizing that property, understanding that we will raise that building and expand this. So let's go, Carl. How do you want to do this?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. As the chief eloquently put it, and John just now, and Larry, you can see here by the tan, this is the existing firehouse that John just went through, and you have the adjacent parcel and the back section. The top drawing is lined up with it, so it's a schematic section of Main Street. So you can see the existing structure next to the firehouse, the adjacent parcel. And it's kind of suggestive of the addition's height there, so you can get a sense of its scale and magnitude against the existing structures, which is important when we maintain the streetscape. Like getting this additional parcel, as everyone said, we can spread out more, and that's very important. We don't need to go up.
Just
Can I pause you for just a second? Maybe it's good to get a mic closer to him.
Well, he's got, yeah, let me,
Well, because he's not really, maybe it should be kind of in front of him as he's talking.
yeah, if you want to,
I just want to make sure
People at
everybody.
home can hear you.
Yes.
I was thinking the one behind it probably was picking it up, but it wasn't on, so it probably wasn't.
Yeah.
What?
And part of the original studies was, just to mention quickly, was this site was tough. We would have to vacate it. By having this additional parcel, if the construction is started at the back, we'll be able to work forward. So there's a way to do this and to get this building constructed and keep the fire department in the facility as long as possible, so we can stage that. It's obviously going to be a delicate balance, but we'll keep them in there as long as they can. So this is kind of, this initial, just a study of the site plan and the schematic elevation.
And you can see to the right, the dashed outlines to the right that are uncolored. The middle one is the existing second property And then you can see a little bit of the outline of the what do you call it, the emergency service building that's there.
The ambulance, yeah. Right.
Right. Those circles you see in the elevation at the top, those are just designations for us. Those are like column grid lines. That's,
Right.
you know, we're not putting columns with circles on top of each other, you know.
Ornamental
Yeah.
circles, I like it,
Yeah, so.
with numbers.
And before we go to the next slide, the firehouse obviously has 4 bays currently in this. So when we go to the next slide, you'll see what we're proposing.
Right.
So here we are, the next slide, it's a little large, it's a little more easier to see. The existing facility is these gray walls that go around, and it's got that diagonal hatch in it, just so everyone knows, and at home also. The tan color on the drawing is the proposed fire department areas on the first floor. You can see we are now having 3 bays in the existing. The ladder is proposed to be moved over into the addition with a new bay, but it's still 4. This
And
bay,
those outlines you see of those rectangles, those are the actual footprints and dimensions of those specific pieces of apparatus.
right.
So we know that where they park, and that they fit comfortably within the base.
And as you can see, we're also, by moving the ladder, we have significantly more depth to fit a much larger apparatus as the department grows and the existing. So we've also proposed to open up the back so they can fit the boat and some of the gator and some of their other equipment. So the apparatus floor is increasing in that regard also. Now, to address some of the other items the chief brought up also is in regards to decontamination. We are proposing a separated and self-contained gear storage room in the back corner here with a decontamination room. So if they can respond and come back to an incident and come back, they will go around the outside of the building and enter the back of the building. So it will be contained. They're not going to be walking through the facility, and it'll be separate and distinct. So they can wash their gear, everything that when it's nice and clean, they hang it nice in their gear turnout area. So that's kind of the apparatus floor. The front is proposed to have a new entrance with the radio room, as the chief said, that sticks out into the front apron area. So they have a much better visual access across the bays to make sure when the trucks are going out, everyone's safe and for response. There's also a front covered entrance with a lobby that is a common lobby, that it will have an ADA accessible elevator, which the facility does not have now. So we'll be increasing handicap accessibility to the second floor. Facility will be much more usable by everyone. There will be a handicap bathroom also in that lobby. So in some of the other things behind that, there's storage. In this plan also, I forgot to mention, is that the trucks are being shifted around. Obviously, the ladder's moving. Rescue is now over here. There's going to be a new Cascade right behind it, dedicated, as they indicated earlier. So it has much more storage. There's going to be hose storage behind it. And there's some other space over on the far right that can be used for storage, the machine to wash the floors, general maintenance stuff. So that's kind of a overview of the plan of the first floor. And we can go up to the second floor.
By the way, if you have any questions, just
Yeah,
ask.
chime in.
It's not just a
Yeah, so I
nonstop.
think it's really, so I was
Yep.
just confirming the top right corner on the first floor, that's where the turnout gear is.
Correct.
And then what are the behind, I guess, either 177 or 178, like right behind it, next to like the Cascade system, what are those boxes?
That's for the boat and for the gator.
Those are storage areas.
Yeah, storage areas for vehicles. It's
Okay.
actually, if they ever want to move that, it could be training area also too.
Okay.
What's on this, on the bottom right?
This is out on the street. It's a
That's the
flat,
street, that whole part of the street?
yes, this is the curb line is a little bit further out existing. This is a set of stairs up. The grade, as you know, in that earlier image, the grade is falling away. Starts out high here and across the whole apron, it's falling.
No, it goes down the
So
street.
downhill.
But that
Oh, Main Street.
area in the corner, I know, like everywhere on Main Street. But
Yeah.
that corner, that whole corner, I guess I see what looks like brick, that's the street, right?
Yeah,
It goes all the way back? What's behind, what's on that bottom corner?
well, with the hatch area is more to indicate the common area. The yellow color is dedicated and secure fire department area. The front is
Oh, I
just an entry lobby. So I kind of use that hatch to indicate the bathroom's common, it's an entry lobby. And obviously,
That's a
out,
lobby.
yes.
Okay.
From this point back is lobby, out,
That's
this is
what
just a.
Yeah, that's my question.
That's the
That's
entry.
that's an outdoor, the sidewalk line is really, can you see the stairs there in the low bottom?
Yes.
Right about that line is the sidewalk.
Right.
line. So this is, matter of fact, there's a flagpole, we'll point to it, call right there.
Yeah, the flagpole and a bell are being
Right
relocated.
there in the
Mhm.
plaza. And you go into a vestibule. Yeah, all of that brick pattern is essentially like common space
Common
lobby.
space.
Okay.
Okay, all the way back. We even have the brick pattern shown in the bathroom, the handicap restroom, which is right behind the elevator.
Mhm.
You can see that.
And the area where the flagpole is, to stay onto it, was pushed a little bit to the right because where our ladder is not where it was before. To actually back that into its bay, you need that space. That's why that's pushed back a little bit.
It's gonna curve.
And the curve
Correct.
as well.
I was wondering how much, I was trying to eyeball it, but I'm not good at that. So the increase in square footage on the first floor goes from what to what? In other words, the existing square footage on the first floor is how much and what does it go to?
John,
Yeah, let's see,
It's in that thing he sent us.
Oh,
right here.
the first floor is about 2,870 square feet, 2,870
before or after?
for existing,
Existing, okay.
and we're adding 4,000.
So it's more than double.
It's more than doubling.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Kinda could- you can
It's
see
also
that.
the lot plus behind the building, 18 feet
Right.
deep.
Oh, there you go.
Right.
The whole building, by the way, from the basement, the first floor and the second floor, the total is about 6,600, a little more than 6,600 square feet. And we're adding about 12,200 square feet.
Okay.
So we're essentially doubling the square footage of the building.
Thank you very much.
So Mitchell, I don't know if you can see the hatching across there, but
Right.
you see where that hand is?
Yeah.
So this is hatched out, going across and then down.
Oh, yeah.
That
That's the
hatched
No,
existing
I
area.
saw that. What I was saying was that my eyes, I'm trying to figure
Yeah.
out, is that double, is that one and a half?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to get
Gotcha.
like a, yeah.
Yep.
No, if I see it, I just can't tell.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it can be deceptive, and it's,
Mhm.
that's why I like to know the numbers.
Those are the second floor ladder.
Yeah, we can go to the second floor. So up here on the second floor, you
Have
can
a
see.
lot of texture going on here.
Yeah, sorry, but you can see the diagonal hatch and this is the existing building. The shape is a little more defined up here than what it currently is. This area is all basically to remain as is. So minor adjustments for energy, things like that, but that's really proposed to stay as is. The addition, when you come up, the fire stair or the elevator, there's another handicap bathroom up here. This space is kind of proposed as a gathering space. Could be a meeting room, could be whatever, but that, right now, that area we're showing as a shared area, and there's access into here to a meeting room. The hatch of the rest of the floor is the fire department areas. The back section here has got locker rooms so they can shower, which is important. And then also their offices administration along the whole back, which will get good light.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So just in thinking about the firehouse, that first floor, what is the height? Because so when I would assume that that's higher than a normal height. So that still stays the same height, that first floor. And then when we're talking about a second floor, we're talking about
Yeah.
above what's existing.
The floors are proposed to align with what's existing. This new addition is going to blend right in. There's no change in elevation.
Okay.
To get additional height in that new bay, we're going to use a different type of system, maybe plank or something like that, to make sure we don't have steel beams sticking down like the current firehouse. And
We're not raising the height of the building.
right,
I mean, maybe if we, with the facade, there might be a curb higher, but there's not an additional floor or even a half a floor.
So currently, there's 2 floors.
correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So,
that, I mean,
and the
that,
heights wouldn't change, obviously.
right.
Correct.
Okay, because in my mind, I'm thinking that first floor is obviously is higher than normal height, and then you have a second.
It's tall, yeah.
It's about
I've never
4,
been in the firehouse.
it's about
gonna
14.
remain the same, it's about 12 feet on the first floor.
Right,
Right.
I'm gonna go visit the firehouse because I obviously have
Right,
not
yeah.
seen the
So you're
firehouse.
keeping that,
Except
the
from
original
outside.
building is staying, then it's not being raised?
correct,
Correct.
You're building around it?
around it.
Okay.
And we're got obviously some structural, to open those doors up in the front, we're
Sure,
gonna have
sure,
some
yeah.
steel beam changes, things like that. Yeah, and
the
some
basement.
footings, underpinning along the back will have to be done, because we'll get to the basement in a minute, but the basement is gonna be deeper than the current basement, so there's some structural things there that'll have
Mitch
to
and I
happen.
obviously need to go on a field trip to the firehouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was a key thing that the acquisition of 86 Main Street opened up, was the fact that we didn't need to add that third floor. The previous plan back in 2014 had a third floor going on, and it just was unwieldy and not appropriate in that location.
Yeah, but what we really gain is space for the ladder.
Well, right, and then add on to that, yeah. And that was the point that, I don't think I even mentioned it in my presentation. The previous plan, although it was unattractive, it didn't even accomplish the goals that we needed it
Yeah,
to.
I mentioned that in my preamble.
Yeah, there you go.
We would spend $10 million and not
get what we
got
needed.
80% of what we needed.
Right.
I'll just point out to you here too, just to cover this.
We can move this table out of the way. I apologize, that's there. You want to slide that out?
You see that line right there? This is the adjacent parcel where there's a house right here.
Yep.
So this whole part of the proposal here is where that existing house is that you guys have purchased and that we use.
And I forgot to mention downstairs, the doors for the bays are going to be wider. That's where we're getting much more significant room around the trucks. We're going to have like close to 8 feet between the trucks, where they have maybe 2 feet now.
Keep those doors open.
Yeah.
For the most part, the second floor is the fire department's, personnel use. Their large meeting room, training room, their offices across the back, restrooms, a small little lounge area in the center. So that's really what this is. This is probably, for the most part, not a public access floor. It's department activities.
What's in the bottom left-hand corner?
This is the adjacent
No,
building.
no,
Oh.
of the old space, right where your finger is, right there, yeah. No, higher,
This-
right there, yeah.
That whole room stays, it's
That's
existing.
their
Our existing second
Yeah.
floor right now.
Okay, so everything that's there now is gonna stay there?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
What is there now?
It's our meeting area.
It's just an open room. Really.
Yeah.
A kitchen,
Right.
a very small bathroom.
That's
The kitchen and storage is right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and again, what you're gaining in the back, can be office space or can be any other type of space as the needs of the department change.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that's like 7,000, I'm just looking at what Larry sent before, so that is about 7,000 square feet.
Right. If we,
Each of the floors is about 7.
right.
correct. The addition is,
Except for the basement.
right, the basement a little smaller.
Yeah.
And you need that many offices, is that, or you think it'll be used for other things?
Mostly offices.
Yeah.
One is a closet in the middle.
Yeah, they have department records are in the middle, and there's 2 flanking offices.
Because with the expansion on the first floor, we're really not where our chief's office is now, which I can show you guys. Really won't be there. So we need, even for department activities, for our own offices up there.
Makes sense.
Their current offices are in a steel elevated platform tucked away in the corner of the truck room.
You can come in, you just gotta watch your
Sounds
head.
nice.
But if you're over 6 feet tall, you can't stand up.
Right, I refuse to meet with them.
So,
Yeah, again, it was a creative solution to not having any space for the chiefs, is what it was.
And turn.
It's kind of like, it's almost like the fire department clubhouse.
We go to the next one.
Treehouse?
Yeah, the treehouse. Except made out of steel. So like,
So down here, this is the basement. Just to give a general overview, this is the unexcavated section. The apparatus is above here. So this is the existing footprint. This little piece of the building will be taken off. It's where the current stairs are for the current fire department. That would be dug down deeper and would become a fitness room that is a shared space. That's why it's shown with that hatch, that's tile hatch. So that's consistent through. So you would come down the elevator or the stair, you would have a small lobby down here. There's some fire department storage here, but there's also a handicap shower and single-use bathrooms down here for police or fire to use. There's an ADA elevator and some mechanical rooms behind it. And then introduced here on this floor, you'll see the blue is his police department use.
so one of the things I can go into just to mention is, and we'll talk about other facilities and other facility needs for the village, but one of the needs that we're trying to accommodate in this plan is relocating the current outdoor police firing range that is located up off of Cyrus Field Road. I think you probably know. Certainly if you live near there, you definitely know. And we're trying to put it into a controlled and safe facility. when the idea was first floated to me by someone, Ed, probably, I thought it was a little bit off the wall. But the reality is that it's actually a tremendous use of this kind of space that is basically underground, I guess. Yeah. And it solves an issue that we've had for many years, and that is that we currently use an outdoor range. We've looked into enclosing it in the outdoor area, so putting some sort of a structure around it, and it's, many hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that, and it's still sitting out there in the middle of the Irvington Woods, right across from the
And
reservoir.
I think the other thing I'll add to that, Larry, is that there's a severe lack of firing range space for police departments countywide. I'm gonna say region-wide. A lot of the ranges that were in use, like things like Camp Smith was a place where the county did most of their training, especially for recruits. It's been closed since 9/11. So there's been a real lack. There's a few, the county obviously has, 12 bays, something like that. Rye has, I think, 2 or 4 bays. Yonkers has, one precinct has some, like 6 bays. But it's just really hard to get the slots. And then if you do, you typically have to pay overtime. So it's not just, hey, the county can give us, Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Great, now we're gonna pay, 8 guys to qualify, actually have to qualify at least annually. You're gonna pay 8 guys overtime to go over to, the county so you can get it then. So it's really, it's a big need, which is why it's not ideal to have a firing range that's outside. And I often get stuck in the middle between the residents who are complaining that, there's gunfire going off, and if you think about being a police officer, you don't always have the best conditions, so they go at dusk, they go at night, they go during rain, they go in basically all conditions, and they don't always have time to let everyone know, so it's not great having an outdoor range in 2022. So this would solve, again, another issue, and I'm thinking this would even be for our neighboring departments, something that would be, kind of a big need that would be filled, so. There's also a lot more.
Can we generate revenue? Can we charge them?
Sure.
I'll just share
We'll see.
the site. We've just finished an entire master plan to expand the village of Elmsford's Village Hall. They bought an adjacent property. We're expanding the Village Hall. Believe it or not, their police department's in the Village Hall, and they have a firing range in the basement of their existing Village Hall. As small as that building is, we've renovated the entire building. That was hands off.
Because they're so rare.
It's so rare that we left that alone.
My understanding was Irvington had one, but it didn't, to get up to the
They're-
code to have like air,
They're clearly a very rare commodity.
they are, it's really, there's just not enough of them. And it's,
What's the size of that? I mean,
And I was going to ask that same question. How does this size compare to the existing firing range off of Harriman? And I'm assuming that this meets whatever requirements there are.
Well, what's
Yeah.
the dimension that we have there?
The outside's unlimited,
Yeah.
and it's more a little bit more universal. This is about
Yeah,
10
so
feet longer than a minimum standard
Right.
shooting range.
It's
And only
50
by
feet plus the.
certain sense, that's as big as a building.
It's
Right,
50 feet
right,
plus
but this is
41.
going to allow them to qualify on a,
there's
Qualified
basically a
shooting.
50 shot qualifying program, or whatever you call it, where you have to shoot. The furthest I think is I think it's only something like 75. Yeah, 75, or it might be 50.
25 yards.
so which
25
direction
yards.
would they be
Thanks,
shooting?
yeah. So it's 25 yards, you
Toward
got,
the
they
line
can shoot
this way.
like
Yeah, right.
5 there, and then they move it in.
And
It's like,
what's that
it's like a
room?
whole, then you do like different hands, it's like a whole thing, but it's a
Right.
50 shot thing.
Storage
It's,
for
I don't know, it's 40 or something.
secure storage.
It's
No,
not,
it's still
Whatever they
50.
want.
but I think to qualify, you don't need to get all 50.
Check
It's
in
like,
desk,
it's like,
John, or
you get 45
Then you go
or
into the-
40 or
Yeah,
something like that.
Got it.
But that's what it is. So it's like, it's a standard length. And some can do shotguns, some can't indoors.
I'm gonna assume that this is, I guess, thinking of the residents in that area, that's gonna be what, like soundproofed or something?
Yeah,
It's like-
it will be underground, and I obviously have a shielded room with a bullet catch at the back. I mean, there's
It
holes.
needs ventilation,
Yeah.
it needs, and in that ventilation system, it has to go straight to the roof.
Right.
That's designed by a specialist that just does that.
Correct.
It's
Not
super
necessarily.
regulated, 'cause you think about lead. and
Yeah.
those types of
right,
things.
right, and imagine all the lead that's out with the outdoor range. I don't even want to think about that.
It's one of the problems we're trying to correct.
But you know,
It's completely encased.
Yeah.
You can see there are no windows up around it, and of course above it is the apparatus floor, which will be concrete. So you've got this very sealed structure, and then we introduce all of the acoustical requirements and so on. So it's really, you can't say it's totally quiet. I can't say that, but at the same time, nothing like what they hear today outside.
And it's also like typically when you stand just outside the range, you can't even hear it. You can hear it inside, but you can't really hear it inside. It's like the acoustic, buffering or whatever is so good. That I don't think you'll be able to hear it outside the building.
That'll be addressed as part of the design.
Yeah.
no, I remember when I first started working in Manhattan in 1993, I remember walking through Greenwich Village and seeing Gun Club and being like, how could there be a, like size and noise and everything? And you never heard anything. And it was just,
Yeah, it's kind of, as kind of left field as the idea was when I first heard it, it actually, it's kind of made for it when you really think about it. And the need is there. So it's probably not a need that you had heard us talk about, but it's a need that we want to address for sure.
And part of this level of the job.
Yes.
that we're talking.
Yeah, this is part of this overall project.
Right, and that's the reason why there's some common areas, the lobby to get down there, so it's.
What else we got?
Is this,
Yeah.
is the next of the?
No, we have the roof
A
plan
roof,
next.
roof plan?
Oh, yeah,
It should
okay.
be next.
Should be next to the roof plan.
Obviously, roof plan here, it's obviously much clearer here to see the existing versus the new. The fire stair, one fire stair will go to the roof, which the facility doesn't have today, which is it's required bringing it up to code.
Have a hatch with a ladder? What do you have?
You can have that.
You can have a hatch, yeah.
No, what do you have now?
Yeah, they could use the ladder.
It's
They use the ladder.
pretty precarious ladder that you have to climb.
Yeah.
And we
So,
can watch fireworks up there, right?
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, if you look at the second floor lobby, that looks up and down Main Street.
Right. And we'll get to that in
This
a
is the party deck.
yeah. And up here, we have opportunities, obviously, for green
Where's the
infrastructure.
jacuzzi?
So for up here, we could possibly do green things. We could do solar, we could do green palleted roof for rainwater retention. So those are things can be studied with this. It's a good spot for
We
that.
really want to make the building, and we will, as sustainable as we can, okay? And in terms of both mechanical systems, insulation values, which today, of course, the building probably doesn't have really much of any insulation. So even though it may be expanding this with the technologies today, with mechanical equipment, as Carl said, if we have the funds to put photovoltaic panels up here for electricity, use, as well as some vegetated areas, we could likely have a reduction in your operating costs of this building, even though we're expanding onto it, because of the abilities that we'll have to insulate it properly and to put the proper mechanical equipment and lighting in there as well. So.
And we've already had a meeting with our grant writer to make sure that she's on board with this project, should it go forward, to make sure that she's looking for opportunities to, especially on the green side, which we know there'll be funds available. We just need to make sure everything matches up correctly, but we definitely want to pursue that.
Okay, and that brings us to our next slide, which,
Yeah, I'm going to switch off here. 'cause
this is a conceptual design. We went forward and put our, best foot forward to put up a design here that blends into the community.
I'll get it on here in a second.
We wanted it, you'll see in the facade in a second, but it's designed to look like kind of blend into the small storefronts and everything that you have downtown.
So what I want to say, and Carl touched on it, is that, as I said before, we've been working together on this for 9 months. There has been very little time devoted to the exterior facade part of it. That part of it will be, part of a design effort that's going to take a number of months. We needed to focus on the interior to make sure everything worked and lined up and all the needs were being met and all of that. So I don't want you to think that this is like a final design in any way. I'm sure I just had to make sure that disclaimer is out there. So, which is not to say that it's not attractive, but there'll be plenty of opinions down the road, that we'll look forward
So
to.
we shouldn't critique window location or trim.
It's
Yeah,
actually a good photograph to get the mass and bulk understanding of the proposed. You can see that they're not raising it, and you can see by from the grade up, carry up to the lobby, you're not losing, the building's not growing in height even though you're going downhill.
And you can see here, this is the added apparatus right here. It'll be slightly pushed back in the facade, and the original is the other portion. So we're
Right,
trying
we
to,
had 4 we have 4 bays now where the 3 bays are.
correct.
And we're
And we're
gaining
maintaining the 4.
an entire spot for the longest piece of equipment.
Right, so all the way to the right is where the ladder would be.
Right.
You know, you can see the pole.
Yeah, and there you can see the stairs now.
I'm
There.
just glad we get to keep a lot of the historic, beautiful building we have now.
And look, the reality is, you know, you have a replacement of the ladder truck coming up in an undetermined date, although you probably want to throw a date out there, but, you know, it's probably 3 or 4 years away, let's say. Whatever
Yeah,
that
the
number.
capital budget it is,
Yeah, whatever that is, right? But the point is that if you, the design and the cost of that could be very different if you're designing it for the old facility versus a new facility. And as you alluded to before, and it's not insignificant, you know, the difference. So this shows you the difference and the elbow room that you have in the new plan.
It was just our shot at showing you guys massing in some color. and
No,
how
it's a valuable picture.
Yeah, we want to complete it, complete the picture.
Mark?
I was drifting off, and I'm not sure if I heard this correctly, but with this kind of layout, we're not ordering specialized trucks anymore, right? To reduce sizes. Wasn't there something about a lot of the trucks have to be specially engineered to fit into the existing?
Correct, so.
So that would add
Previous
cost,
trucks had-
obviously.
Right, that would come out the window, but we're gonna choose things that are practical, number one, for our village and our surrounding communities.
Right.
But yes, it would have to obviously fit the environment.
Right, there still are overriding limits because of topography and terrain
Oh,
and
okay.
roads that they have to travel on, so
But not
that,
every,
That's not gonna-
There's many hills in this town, Station Road for engines to get through. Yeah,
Strawberry Lane, right?
but the constraints put on it by the building currently would be
Right,
alleviated.
So these are 14-foot wide doors.
Right.
What are the existing doors, Carl, now? What do you guys?
10, I think.
12?
10 or 12.
So the doors are themselves 2 feet wider than what exists today?
I thought it was a height issue. Trucks.
There is, but, and these are 12 feet high.
Yeah, 12 feet high.
Right.
In the redoing of the structure, we're going to get a little more height.
So that will, I guess I'm following up on Mark's question. I think I'm lost on that too. Currently, when you order trucks, you have to have something done to them, right? I think,
Height-wise or
height-wise?
length-wise?
No, it's more
Or width?
It's more
It's
length,
more width. yeah.
Oh,
That's the width.
width is the issue.
And that was the, as I was outlining before, the existing issue
Right,
is there's literally no distance
right.
width-wise in between the existing apparatus.
Can I ask you a question? You were mentioning so many ways in which that the building's not up to code. But like, is that, when you say up to code, are those recommendations or are those
So, no, so-
cited? And
So National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, we have to be compliant with them, or at least we try our best to be compliant with them. And like one of the examples I had outlined was that where the gear storage and where we get dressed is in comparison to where our apparatus is.
No, I understood all that. What I'm saying is that, is there a enforcement? In other words, are we at risk of being fined or cited in some way by a state agency that inspects these things, or is this just best practices?
So
Let's not answer that.
So there's a couple, no, that's okay. No, we
In a
can.
nutshell, best practices, but
That's fine,
if
yeah.
something were to
Right.
happen
It'd be liability,
and,
yeah.
OSHA were to come in,
That was my
Right.
next question.
then that's when you get
That's
questioned
the
and,
issue.
Yeah.
Right, so it's a best practice thing which goes to liability if something bad happens, but there's nobody going around with a pad coming in saying you guys aren't in compliance, here's a $10,000 fine.
not necessarily,
It ha-
OSHA can come in at any point.
Yeah, so it's actually the New York State Department of Labor that comes in. They administer the OSHA rules.
Yeah.
But yes, we get inspections all the time at our facilities. We have not been written up, or I don't even know that we were inspected over there, in my memory. And certainly this building and some other buildings have. If they came in, would any of these rise to the level of violation? I'm not really sure. I think some of the ones that are more serious, like the distance between the trucks, like the diesel exhaust on the equipment that they're wearing, I think all of that stuff is is not
To be
good.
clear, I wasn't making light of best practices, I just meant like I want to know what the
Oh,
stakes
no,
are.
absolutely.
Because if
And-
we're in danger of getting fines and things like that, that obviously is, you know.
No, absolutely,
Yeah.
and OSHA in recent years has been coming around a little bit more frequently.
Yeah.
That we've been made aware from other surrounding communities.
Yeah, no, it's good to know what it is that exactly we're facing, because it could be it could be a financial hit if we did not fix this, is what I'm saying.
Right. Look, there's no question that the items that were outlined as far as deficiencies, that there's, some items on that list are very serious, some are, somewhat serious, and others are frankly an operational issue. Having training sessions in your equipment bay is a bit absurd for people who are volunteering their time to spend time to get trained professionally. It doesn't work. Are we going to get an OSHA violation for that? Probably not. You know what I mean? But so there's definitely is a range of items that were brought up, but some of them are certainly serious. I mean, you heard them yourselves.
No, I appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
And that's
Yes,
the last slide, yeah, that's
it
it.
for us.
Any other?
Any questions, obviously?
I think, for conceptual plan, I think it captures so much. I guess I'll ask the chiefs if there's is there any issues that, any known issues that aren't addressed by the new, by the conceptual plan?
No, it seems like everything was addressed, and, it seems like we were talking about more of a width of space issue, when it comes to everything we're talking about. And that's obviously addressed in this plan. So, definitely appreciate everyone's time, and you guys are more than welcome to come by.
We will, because I don't.
Don't worry, we're not-
I need to conceptualize it.
We're not done yet.
I have
The fun stuff is coming.
Now we get to the good part.
I have a question though.
Sure.
So I know that we had talked about, I think in some prior meeting, the possibility of moving other village employees there. I guess I don't see where.
Well, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to
Okay.
that. Yep, absolutely getting to that.
Okay.
It's an important part of this whole conversation. Okay. Any other questions? John and Carl, thank you both. I mean, they're still here for any questions, of course, but
We don't have any kind of like wild cost.
Yeah.
Guesstimate.
yeah, I'm getting right to that now.
That's what I said was the fun part.
That's the fun part.
I thought the fun part was work with the rest of the village.
Oh, that's fun too. It's a lot of fun.
The way you said fun, I immediately thought you were talking about the money, so, yeah.
Yeah. So let me jump into the finances. So this project, as we discussed back in the summer, for those of you that recall during our capital budget discussions, the project is obviously a very large project. The conceptual budget that our architects prepared, which I'm careful to say is conceptual, there's a lot of design work to be done and a lot of estimating to be done. But they put together a budget. The budget, with a few added items, is approximately $11 million. Again, we talked about that this summer, so hopefully that's not too big of a shock. But in all seriousness, that being the case, is I believe the single largest project in our history. So, and that includes building Scenic Hudson Park and the Burnham Building, library, and all of that. So it's a significant project, and it needs to be looked at carefully. In order to complete a project like this, we would be borrowing the money. It would be paid back over 25 years, which is what New York State finance law allows. I'm sure you know over the years, we routinely do that. We routinely borrow money to pay for capital projects and equipment, large scale items. So this is nothing new. I also want to mention, and again was discussed over the summer, is that the village does have a fairly healthy unreserved fund balance on hand. That's money that we have in the bank that is not designated for any particular use. And we have approximately $7 million in reserve. That $7 million represents 35% of our annual operating budget. And by measures established by the New York State Controller's Office, 25% is considered the top end of the range, and above that is considered excessive and frankly needs to be returned to the taxpayers in some way. So we've typically operated in a range of 15 to 25%. We've allowed it, although we've used some for capital projects in the past, we have allowed it to exceed 25%, and just keep that in mind as we talk about this. So we expect this, the money needed for this project to be borrowed in 4 tranches, and it would match the progress of design and construction. We would expect in 4 successive years to borrow in, let's say, 2023, year 1, $1 million, which would primarily be used for design and engineering. 2024 would be $3 million, 2025 would be $4 million, and 2026 would be $3 million. So you can hear from that timeline is probably a 3-year construction period, and the money would be borrowed accordingly as we go along, totaling $11 million. Assuming that none of our fund balance were to be used to help offset any of these borrowings, the cost to an average taxpayer would be $431 per year over the 25 years. It averages, it fluctuates as the money's borrowed, and I'll show you that on a table. But it would average $431 a year just for the cost of the debt service associated with this project. If, however, you assumed using $3.1 million of your fund balance, not all at once, but on a phased approach to help smooth out the initial debt service, if you were to use $3.1 million of your $7 million that you have today, and you use that $3.1 million, not equally, but over a period of the first 10 years of this project, so where the biggest amounts are being borrowed and paid back, and you use that to smooth out the cost of this project, the average cost to a taxpayer would be $363 instead of $431 per year, again, over the 25 years. And I can show you that. In a quick table just so you understand how that would work. So give me a second to go to full screen here. Okay. So the yellow column is the repayment of the debt service. Of course, this column here are the actual principal and interest payments that would be repaid over the life. And there's more to the bottom of this screen, as you can imagine, but let's just look at the top for now. These are the principal and interest payments. Assuming no fund balance were to be used, these are the annual costs that would be attributed to this project on a per taxpayer basis, which assumes an average value home, which in this village at this point is approximately 1.1 million. Obviously, you can adjust up or down depending on where you live and what your home is assessed at. If you were to use this column here, these amounts of fund balance, if you were to appropriate them as part of the budget process to help reduce the debt service payments for those particular years, this column right here in these first 10 years adds up to 3.1 million that I mentioned before. If that were to be done, then the cost to the taxpayer, the actual cost that would be taxed, is this column here, which, as you can see, is lower in the first 10 years. It would return to the same level after 10 years because no more fund balance would be used. And the average ends up being the number I mentioned, which is $363 over the 25 years versus $431.
There would always be the option if the fund balance creeped up again to use more fund balance when the 10 years is up, right? That's always a possibility.
Yes, yeah, of course, yep. And frankly, the reverse is true. If for some reason we dip into it for other reasons, unknown reasons, you may need to make adjustments to this. But these are the assumptions that we're working with here. Obviously, the final decision is up to you all.
And this also assumes that there's no grant money.
Yes.
So
yeah, 100%.
I think that the good thing about phasing, the phase over 3 years, 5 years, whatever, is that you have all those potential opportunities to get, grant money. And I do think that there is probably a decent amount of grant money out for projects like this. That again, I think that this project is not building a fire palace, it's building a fire department or a fire station. So, I think it's fairly reasonable. It's addressing such a long-term need to me. And the fact again that it's over several years, I think you have a lot of opportunities to, take a shot at different grants and I think even New York State, I just think about, not that how easy it is to get grants, but, we've been, knock on wood, fairly lucky getting grant money, whether it's for the HVAC system, for the theater, which to me was, not as big a necessity. It's great that we're gonna be able to open all year, but it's not providing fire protection, so I'm fairly confident that you can also have a third column that would say, or that the cap increase would be, maybe a mix of fund balance and grant money, et cetera. Because I'm fairly confident that we can find decent grant money for such a big project. And, I'd be happy to call tomorrow our new congressman and our state senator and our new, county state assemblywoman, and just put this on their radar screen. I know I've mentioned it to some of them already. As well as the stage in Matheson Park. I think that it is a large, that's an understatement. It's the largest project we've ever tried to undertake, but I think we owe it to the men and women of the fire department to seriously consider this. Otherwise, we've been, it's almost more shame on us if we don't go ahead with this, and how we do it and how we figure out the exact dollars and cents, I think is obviously crucial. Whether we decide to have a referendum, if we decide to just do it ourselves, whatever we decide, if we don't go ahead, I almost think it's, we've wasted their time and the taxpayers' money on the plans, and the building inspector's time and your time. And to me, we didn't go in, I think we knew this was going to be an expensive project, when we went into it. So is it more expensive than I probably would have guessed? Probably, but, I think that, I think it's necessary. I don't think it's excessive. I think it's, and I think if you look at, the projects and what people have done in other towns, I just look at Tarrytown, it's how many new firehouses have they had in the last 10 years? It almost blows my mind. Some of them you can almost throw a rock between two of them, but, so I think that, I think that this is something that, this is the page we have to figure out.
And the next one I'm going to show you.
Okay.
There's more to it.
All right. So
Yeah. But no, you're right.
Then.
Yeah, no. I wanted to give another perspective of it, which is.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah, go ahead.
In line with what Brian talked about in terms of grants and what you had said earlier about our grant writers already sort of on the lookout. And back when we were talking about the budget and we decided to fund a number of potential projects with the idea that if we had a level of planning that was quote unquote shovel ready, that would make it easier for us to possibly get grant writing. The level of work which has been done by Mr. Sullivan and his associate, is that enough to then go out and try to get grants, or do we need to then go ahead and do another level of funding and another level of study before we really can consider, going out there and looking for $1 million or $2 million?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a set answer to that question, but my sense, and I don't know how others feel about it, my sense is that the schematic level work that they've done to this point is probably not enough to really understand the elements that you need to seek funding for. Because I think while it's a possibility that a state grant or even a federal grant may come about that is non-specific and can be dedicated to the entire project, the more likely scenario is that you're going to have specific elements that you're going to be really targeting for funding. For example, the HVAC system. It's perfect example. We fully expect it to be heat pump based and, I mean, I don't know all the details. We haven't engineered it yet, but, I would think that there are either incentives or straight out grants that would assist in that area. But that's one element, a very expensive element, but it's one element of a project. And that hasn't even been thought of yet. I mean, conceptually, yes, but not designed. So I think, you can start having conversations, maybe on the high level, political level, so to speak. You can start having conversations about this, and conceptually, you can show people, a conceptual plan. But I think some of the real hard work needs to be done after some additional design work is done. So it's a long-winded answer to say that, similar to what you did over the summer with funding some of the design work, I think the design work here needs to be funded before you can really get a handle on what grant money might be available. The problem is, it's not a small number. We're not just asking you for $100,000 to throw at a project and get a design. It's going to be much more than that to even get a engineered design. So I'd be hard pressed to say, yeah, let's spend the money on design, and then if the project never goes anywhere and it just sits on a shelf, great. That we might be talking about $1 million of engineering and architectural work.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So,
But we can't move forward without that getting done.
yeah, I mean, I think you've got to, while you can pull the plug on the project at any time, I think you have to go into it with the assumption that you're doing it because that you're going to complete it. You know what I mean? Because
And I recognize this is the
Yeah.
first day that this is coming out, and we purposely withheld that level of money from our budgeting for the year.
Right.
To have this conversation and to have the community involved as well.
so anyway,
I'll just share with you further that to echo it, on a few of the projects that we've been involved with. We probably do not need to have a complete total set of construction documents, put it out to bid and get bids. There are some grants that do require that. We're working with the Westchester Arts Council right now on that, and the state arts funds absolutely insist on that. It's kind of tough. But there are, Larry mentioned, HVAC, NYSERDA, for example, right? They don't need the complete set of drawings. So if we give them enough documentation for certain particularly sustainable methods that we're going to use, you can try to tap some of those grant processes. So it's kind of a balance there.
And imagine Fiona knows what to look for early and
yeah, I mean, we're relying on her obviously, and we've brought her into this conversation already.
Yeah, and I think those are the intelligent grants. I think the ones that I'll go after are the ones that are, I would call them non-intelligent, but they're more,
That's your specialty, Brian?
yeah, exactly. They're the, hey, if you guys have some money, kind of like what we did for the HVAC system at, for the theater, it was, hey, we have this need, we've had it for a long time, do you have anything? And I happened to call, Andres, your cousin's office. During the week, they were figuring out where they were allocating money. It was like the perfect storm, but it was, $600,000 or something?
From them, yes. Yep.
So $600,000 from her.
Five from them and 125
From Tom Avenatti, but it was like, some of it was the stars aligned, and it was like, I literally texted her and she said, yeah, sure, let me know how much you need. And I'm like, really? So, it's like, I think there's some of that's what I can start working on that now to help offset even some of the costs of the engineering
Yeah.
potentially. But,
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
I just want to, what you were saying about, I think, sort of if we start down this path, having a commitment to it, right? I guess my only concern, having renovated my own house, right, was what, the budget was with the architects and what it actually costs.
Mhm.
So to look at a number like $10, $11 million in my own experience, right? I'm trying to extrapolate out what that could actually be. So it's kind of difficult, right? Because it's sort of like you have to sort of spend the money to see, but the spending money to see is a big number already.
Right.
Yeah. So I hear you is what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
And I recall that, yeah, you brought that up just that way during the capital budget discussion, and there's no question that, this this is a difficult project in terms of approaching it. There's not going to be an answer that I'll give you that says, I'm going to guarantee you what this is going to cost, and I'm going to guarantee you that we're going to be able to finish it for that. You know what I mean?
Of course.
But what I will say, without spending money, if you start spending some money and you start getting some engineering and design done, then you can start better understanding what your costs are. And it's not just, a wild ass guess, which is not this, by the way. But it's not far from it either, because they haven't done a lot of work, So, and look, if at the end of the day, if the costs balloon from, the anticipated costs balloon from 11 million to 22 million, and you haven't started the project yet, you have every right to pull the plug on the project. And yes, you're out design money, but, you always have control of what you're doing. You know what I mean? You always have,
Yeah, I guess
at any
that's
point in time.
what I'm sort of responding just to what you said, because I hear you and I understand what you're saying. I just think, let's say, as a custodian of the people's money in this town, right? That's just something I would like to have my own head around, given you're right, I have my own experience.
Right, sure.
So I just think, again, from the perspective of a custodian, that would just be my concern, right? What's the cost? And earlier I sort of brought up, I know that we've been having sort of discussions about, all the other departments maybe in utilizing that space. So I would be curious too, to kind of have, and I don't think we're far along there, but what that would look like, right, as well.
No, that's where I'm
Oh,
going
you're
next.
getting there, okay.
Yeah. No, that's okay. And these are
None of
good.
us are letting him get to the next slide.
I know.
The good thing is the concerns that you have about the costs and what could happen with them are things that we all struggle with, and certainly the fire department does as well, because they know that we're worried about it. But Ed and I worry about this stuff all the time. You know what I mean? We're paid to worry.
Seasonal.
So, clearly we want to have the best professionals we can get and the best answers that we can get, before the shovel goes in the ground.
So one related question was that I was going to ask about the sustainability issues, the guidelines or design guidelines. I heard you mention there was some, obviously sustainability approaches differ, depending, some of it depends on budget, so obviously. But I didn't hear anyone mention LEED, so I suppose that we're not trying to throw a lot of money needlessly at certification when we could actually, sorry for my opinion, but we could actually
It's pretty clear.
probably gain quite a bit by just following the new New York energy codes and stuff like that for the building.
Following the
Unless-
energy code is obviously anything lower than that's illegal, right? But you're absolutely correct. You know what? If we build this building, even straightforward, we will achieve LEED certification without even attempting to
Wow.
achieve a certain LEED. You all looked at me and said, John, we want to get a LEED platinum certification, which, by the way, we did one. We did it at Westchester County Airport. We did a hangar that we achieved LEED platinum certification. That was good for the chairman of JP Morgan Chase. Got out of the bag. But anyway, we will easily achieve a LEED silver certification.
Well, I guess I'm wondering, it seems like there's a certain, if we're talking about budgetary costs and stuff, there's a certain amount of overhead involved in the process if you decide to go for certification, right?
Yeah.
But I
You
don't
can't do
think,
it after the fact, can you?
That's right, that's right.
but I don't think we're interested
You
in,
know, Con Ed recently, maybe you guys are aware of that, Con Ed has had tremendous recent credits if you applied to them, if you changed all these lamps in here to
LED.
right, LEDs. They've now stopped it. They've given away so much money that they pulled the plug on that program. But there are others, and there will be others.
Right.
So, when you guys dive into it, if you want us to achieve unequivocally a certain LEED certification, obviously we will do that. But I'll just share with you, the way we build buildings anymore today, we achieve LEED certification without going too far off, or out on the limb.
Concept, might not file it that way, but
Yeah,
it
might-
No, yeah,
Might
that's,
not file it that way, right.
Even if you're sort of retrofitting an existing building?
Oh, yeah. And think about what we looked at here. I mean, this is a bit more than a retrofit of a building, right? It's a pretty substantial expansion, pretty substantial like change to the roof and to the envelopes, to the doors, to the windows, both mechanical systems, all of those hot buttons. So that's why we could achieve it.
And last 2 years ago, the fire department, in repairing their heating system, installed a dual burning system that's very efficient. And believe it or not, set it up for this next phase with another unit next to it. So we already have the existing building well on its way to being efficient.
Right.
So, any other questions there?
Get you
No,
slide,
you better
Larry.
go fast.
Yeah, no, so I'll keep moving. No, it's fine. So the costs that we talked about here are how much it would be for an average taxpayer over the life of the bonds. Another perspective that I think would be helpful is what would this debt service and the resulting payments, what would the payments do to your ability to stay within the tax cap, which is a 2% tax cap in New York State. It's a tax cap that you've been compliant with every year that it's been in effect for probably over a decade. And so the next slide, I think, will go a long way to answering that. So the yellow column is the year-to-year change in the tax levy and the percentage of that year-to-year change as a result of the newly added debt service. So as the project ramps up, as the new payments come online here and ramp up to the full amount, because as I said, we're borrowing this over 4 years. The year-to-year change is negligible in the beginning and more significant by year 4. So in year 4, as shown on this table where that arrow is, we would have almost a 3% increase in the tax rate just attributed to the debt service on this project, not counting any other cost increases like salary increases and any of the other costs that may be going on at the world at that time. So those are obviously significant numbers. It would fully compromise your ability to stay within the tax cap, which is not fatal in terms of, you can override the tax cap if you wish. You don't need a vote of the public, unlike the school district. You could vote that yourself. But I just wanted to put that in perspective. So, and then after year 4, the payments are already built into the budget. They're at the maximum amount, and they're basically level throughout the remaining years of the project. As you can see here, there's virtually no changes.
Larry, why in 2029, 2030, 2031, 2032, 2033, and 2034 is the rate higher if we use the fund balance than if we don't? Shouldn't it be the other way around?
So let me explain what the scheme was. Scheme is a bad word. What the plan was, what the scenario was for using fund balance in an organized way. So the way I envisioned using fund balance on an annual basis was to take the increase of debt service from one year to the next and cap that increase at $50,000. So not allow this project to impact the budget any more than $50,000. $50,000 is an arbitrary number, but it's a number that results in a manageable amount of debt service being used. The reason that the impact to the taxpayers is somewhat higher is because in the initial years, and I'm sorry if this is a little bit butchered, but I'll try to explain it as best I can. So in the initial years, as the debt service is rising, you're using an increasing amount of debt service to a point where in the 4th year, you're using, just in 1 year, you're using $700,000 of your fund balance almost to help to offset things so that it can at least allow the impact to rise by only $50,000. At that point, there's no more added debt service being brought on the books. We've borrowed everything we're going to borrow. At that point, we need to start weaning ourselves off of the use of that fund balance. We can't keep using $700,000 a year forever. We need to get back to zero, really. So on the way down, we're reducing the amount of fund balance we use by about $100,000 a year. So we're going to have $50,000 of impact on the way up annually, and we're going to have about $100,000 of impact on the way down until you get back down to zero. If you made it 50,000 on the way up and then 50,000 on the way down, it's too many years.
Oh, because the percentages are relative to the year before, not across, I understand.
Yes.
Okay.
So on the way up, it's a little bit less expensive. On the way down, it's a little bit more expensive, but that's 5 years out from now, and there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then.
No, I get it.
So-
So I was comparing the wrong numbers. I totally understand why that makes sense.
Okay, so the goal of this exercise, and by the way, this is not written in stone at all, as you can see. This is for discussion purposes. If the project goes forward, this is something that you will need to nail down so that the public is aware of exactly what you plan to do. But a plan is a plan, and any future board can change the plan, or you can modify it as you see fit. But for this purpose, the goal here was to, in an organized way, to come up with the use of fund balance and not total more than I felt you could handle. I didn't think it was appropriate to take your $7 million fund balance and bring it down far too low. So 3.1 million is the number where it ended up, meaning that's how much you would use. And it would be done so over 10 years, which is the way this, I didn't highlight it, but I'll highlight it for you here. That's those cells right there. That's the use of fund balance on an annual basis. And that it makes the project more manageable from a budgeting standpoint. And I think it's an appropriate use of your fund balance for what we termed as the largest project ever in your history. If there's ever a time to use some of that.
Right, and that's returning money to the taxpayer.
Exactly. So that's, again, that doesn't mean you can still stay compliant with the tax cap, because, you still are going to have 1/3% increase or a 1/6% increase here, or 0.6% increase here in some of the future years. And that, coupled with any other costs that may be going on during those years, may make it challenging. Plus, you don't know whether the tax cap will be 2% or not. Right now, obviously, the rate of inflation is far above 2%. It will be 2% this coming year. But in the years leading up to this, it wasn't even, I think it was closer to 1% in some years. So, staying compliant with the tax cap is going to be a challenge, but it's certainly more manageable if you handle it this way.
I mean, to me, my takeaway, Larry, is that kind of our years of fiscal restraint, conservatism, the fact that we build up these kind of rainy day funds of taxpayer money that we want to return, it gives us the flexibility to figure this out in future years, I think, is my brief takeaway. If I summed up what you said for the last 40 minutes in
Right.
one line, is that
Right.
we have the resources to work on this and figure it out, so it's manageable for the average resident.
Right.
And this isn't contemplating any grants right
Right.
now.
Yeah, of course.
So, to me, that's another big piece of this that's probably, hopefully equal almost to the offset of the fund balance. So, and again, that's probably, it might be a little bit optimistic, but gotta be optimistic going in. I think, but I think you laid it out very well.
Thanks. Okay. Well, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay. So let me stop sharing this because I think you've probably seen enough of that. What I wanted to get into is a topic that you touched on earlier when you talked about the future facilities and future use. So I think you'll see after we talk about this a bit that the beauty of this project is actually in the flexibility that it can provide you in the future. And to talk about future plans, you can't talk about future plans unless you can acquire an adjacent parcel to the existing firehouse facility. That's the reality. So we know that there's a parcel to the west, 84 Main Street, that's a possibility. None of these conversations can happen unless that can happen. I think it's also important to understand what those other facility needs are. You know, in the last 5 years, there's been a study to discuss the future needs of the Town Hall Theater. The theater, this board authorized a study to determine the feasibility of creating a new entrance into the theater. The goal of that project at the time, and still exists now, the goals of that project were that they wanted some sort of public visibility on Main Street as opposed to being tucked away behind the building in the rear entrance of the building. They wanted lobby space with the ability to have concessions like a normal theater would have, more restrooms, a box office on the ground level as opposed to winding your way through the building to get to the box office, additional rehearsal space, storage space. Those were all the stated goals back in 2017 when you authorized the feasibility study. After the feasibility study was complete, which was approximately 2019, the recommendation was to build a new entrance in a new structure attached to this building off the northeast side of it. So between here and the Main Street School, on property that was actually school district property. That gave them, you know, the presence on Main Street. It was set back off of Main Street, but they gave them a presence on Main Street, and all of the other needs that they were looking for. The project, it was budgeted fairly roughly, and it was not including a lot of elements that needed to be included. But the estimated cost, if you updated it to reflect 2025 construction costs, which is probably about the time it might be built if we decided to do it now, would be about 6.5 million. There was going to be some fundraising effort undertaken to offset that. I don't know how much they would have been able to offset. But that was a project that the board gave its go-ahead to. And not that you appropriated the money for it, but you wanted to take it to the next level, which was to seek out, undertake a fundraising effort, and then further develop that design. That project was put on hold because of the pandemic. The timing was such that 2019 is when the study came out and the conversations happened and fundraising efforts were just about to start. You just engaged the services of a fundraising consultant, and that all came to a screeching halt. So that's a project that's out there that had support, at least the last we checked with this board. As far as other facilities go, this room right here, this that I'll refer to as the Justice Court. The Justice Court has a significant number of deficiencies, and you can probably guess what they are just sitting in here, but I actually went back to a 2008 security audit that was done by the New York State Unified Court System. And they identified the fact that there's no separation between the judge and court staff and prisoners, potential prisoners. There's no physical separation between the public and private areas of the courtroom. There's no public waiting room. There's no separate private judges' chambers. There's no jury room, so you couldn't even have a jury trial here if you wanted to. You could probably try, but I don't think it would work. There should be separate entrances for judicial staff and non-judicial staff, and there clearly aren't. So there's a number of security deficiencies with this justice court, and we've not even begun. They've done some efforts to address them, but we've not really begun to do anything because there's no solution that is in this building for that. There just isn't the room for it. We also identified our other buildings. The deficiencies aren't great, but they are still there, which is our recreation center aside from being a very high maintenance old building, is not ADA compliant. Not even the counter that that they see customers at is ADA compliant. Despite it being on ground level, it still steps down into the building. The property, could ultimately be repurposed if it were not being used as a recreation center, but it's not an ideal location. The village offices, by the way, share the same ADA non-compliance. The only office on the first floor above us, the only office that is ADA compliant is actually my office. But that's not the office that the public typically visits. It's the clerk and the building inspector that get the most traffic, and neither one of those are ADA compliant. So what we're looking at here is a variety of needs, but those needs are being driven by the two large projects that you've asked us to achieve, which is the firehouse expansion, and the theater entrance. And we believe that if we were to acquire an additional parcel across the street, adjacent to the existing firehouse facility, that we could move all of the village's offices that are up on the first floor. So that's the clerk, treasurer, the building department, and the administrator. We could move the justice court and courtroom. We could move all of the recreation offices, and we could probably find a place for some administrative support for the public works department, which has no administrative support right now. We believe that could be relocated to an addition to the facility across the street. In doing that, and by the way, I don't have any pictures to show you, so we've not started designing this. These are concepts and future planning, but to put it in perspective, by moving the offices, the vacated spaces from the first floor above us could be repurposed to be the lobby and a newly restored grand entranceway staircase into the town hall theater the way it used to be. For those of you that don't know, the old entrance to the theater used to be up the second set of stairs to the level where my office is, and then straight back from there, there were staircases that went up to the theater. That was the entrance. We actually have a sketch of it. If you're interested, I'm happy to show it. It's a side, what do you call it, a section? It's a cross section. I'm happy to show it if you're interested of what it actually was. Give me a second here. Quite interesting, actually. Zoom. So these are, let me try to get the full screen here and I'll zoom in a little bit. These are plans from 1962-ish, when they were looking to renovate the library space and take out the lobby and all that.
Larry was just treasurer then.
Yeah, exactly. But up above here is a cross section of the first floor upstairs. So if you know, if you can picture coming in the vestibule and up the stairs, this here is the lobby. Then there's another set of stairs that goes up to the level where my office is, which is here. And then there were a set of stairs in the back here, not terribly dramatic the way this cross section is, but there were a set of stairs which then led up to actually two sets of, two sets of stairs going up to the theater, one right and one left. And if you vacated that floor, you could reopen that lobby. That would, we think, would get the theater what they were looking for, which is a place to gather before and in between performances, concessions and all of the things that they need. There would also be we would need to put an elevator in, we know that, internal elevator as opposed to an appendage on the back of the building. But it would give them their direct presence on Main Street, which was another goal of theirs. And obviously storage and box office and all those other things could be met with proper planning. But it would essentially give them the entire first floor of this building, which is pretty interesting. The other part that they would also get is this space would be vacated, and we think this could be additional rehearsal space and also additional programming space for the recreation department. I shouldn't say additional, because if we ultimately vacate the recreation center, this could be recreation programming space as well.
Does the police department change?
Not yet. That's not in any of our plans right now.
Because I think moving, here for the police department might give them some space from their substandard.
Possibility, yeah. Look, those are all
Right.
things that can be discussed for sure, but
This is the scheme we have for them.
so you use that word again. So, anyway, that's the bigger picture of what we're talking about. And so, let me take this off here. That was interesting while it lasted. I just want to switch back to another page here as I get into. I want to compare. Compare the potential costs that we're talking about here, because I think that's a really interesting conversation. Let's see here, comparison. So from a budget standpoint, just as a reminder, I'll bring this page up here. All right. So I thought it would be an interesting exercise to compare doing the two large stated projects independent of each other without pursuing the additional property across the street. So let's call that scenario one. Scenario one is you expand the firehouse and you continue on your pursuit of a new entrance to the theater, okay? Essentially where we are right now. In very rough numbers that we talked about tonight, the budget for that is $17.5 million. 6.5, as we talked about, for the theater entrance, which is the addition to this building, and the $11 million expansion of the firehouse.
The 6.5, that's like a soft number though, right? It's not or that is.
There's been no engineering work done on that.
Okay.
There's been some feasibility study, very conceptual done, and those numbers were about $4 to $4.5 million at the time in 2017, and there were a number of asterisks below that number of things that they didn't include, and so that plus inflation, and we've moved that up to $6.5 million, but not prepared by a professional estimator.
Could I just interrupt 1 second, because I was on the theater commission when that was going on.
Yeah.
So the money for the theater entrance was intended to be raised privately, right?
Right.
That we had this grant, and I remember the point of the process when the pandemic hit was that they were about to start conducting interviews, where at the end of the interviews they were going to tell us what our community could support. In other words, they might have come back and said you were never getting $4.5 million,
Right.
Or they might have said you could get double that,
Right.
But we'll never know that now because the pandemic shut down. So you're going on the so this just so I'm clear, so I'm understanding.
Yeah, of course.
You're going on the assumption that the private fundraising would fail and it would land on the village to do this if they were going to do it.
Yes.
Okay. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, so certainly some assumptions could be made. I don't know what those assumptions are, as you said, but we
It's
never
the
got
worst
that.
timing ever, right? Like if the pandemic
Right.
was at 6 months later, we would have had an answer to that question, right?
Right.
And we don't have the answer now.
Right,
because of
yeah,
that.
it just wasn't possible. So to put it in perspective, we have essentially $17.5 million of projects in front of us. We have some level of either grant money or fundraising that could be achieved, but we're making the assumption that zero is that number right now. If you were to undertake what we've affectionately called Plan 1B. So 1A is the expansion of the firehouse. 1B is the acquisition of additional property and the moving of village offices, like I outlined.
I'm
If-
sorry, just, so Plan 1B though, with moving the village offices, that would require acquiring something else, right? Because
Yes.
right, because the plan we saw, you couldn't just move people.
Correct, yes. So that plan, so the other scenario that we're trying to compare here is the scenario if you did the firehouse expansion and you went and pursued the additional piece of property, moved offices, and changed this building into more dedicated to the theater, therefore not needing to add on to it. If you went down that path, the rough numbers that we're looking at are actually come in a little less than the numbers outlined for the first scenario. We have $11 million for the firehouse expansion. We see the construction of a building across the street and the moving of the offices at about a $4 million project.
And it's cheap, I'm sorry, it's so much cheaper than the firehouse because not just size, but like of all the technical requirements that go into building a firehouse, which is very different than building. Is that the idea, or is it just based on the
It's
size?
more than that. When you're not building a separate building, you're building a bigger building.
Yeah.
The square foot number changes.
Yeah.
You're not building two outside walls, you're only just building the same one, you're just moving it over.
Right.
Your deck, your excavation costs, your utility costs, your elevator costs, your stair costs. are the right-
HVAC?
So we wouldn't be
budgeted for-
raising the building that we acquired, we'd just be adding to it.
No.
No, we'd be taking
No.
down the second building too.
Oh, okay.
Right, but we would be adding on to the existing newly
Right.
expanded
Oh, the
firehouse.
new building would just be expanding onto the, gotcha. All
So
right.
just slide the
You would
building over
acquire-
another
you would
28
acquire-
feet.
I understand now, gotcha, yeah.
So the-
It wouldn't be as burdensome because, yeah, gotcha.
And
Right.
assuming you'd be doing this all at the same time. Have to.
Otherwise, the number would change drastically.
Right, oh, I see, oh my God,
Yeah,
okay.
we would double the number, more than double the number.
Yeah, no, that makes so much more sense then. Thank you very much for the explanation.
So not to be cryptic about it, but now you can see, if you think back to the floor plan of what was presented initially, the location of those elements, like the entranceway and the staircase and the elevator, and
And the public spaces.
were positioned in such a way to accommodate future expansion.
Gotcha.
So it's why that number can be, right, there's a method to the madness.
Well done.
That's the reason that the number can be as low as that. Not that that's a low number, I'm sorry, $4 million is still a lot of money, but the point is it's efficient and it takes advantage of some synergies. We've also added in some net costs of property acquisition, but also property disposal, in the sense that if the recreation center is no longer used, it could potentially be repurposed. Whether you repurpose it by selling it or use it for some other village reason, that's a decision you all can make in the future, but it would become surplus is what our point is. So the assumption here for this particular schedule is that you would sell it, but that's, future decision. So what all this leads to is that, and look, we're not trying to say that you're getting a bargain here by spending $16.5 million. But what we are saying is that you're dealing with real future facility needs, not just the theater, Justice Court and all the other ADA accessibility issues we mentioned. You're dealing with those facility issues in a responsible way, in an efficient way. As far as building costs go, this is pretty efficient, and you're getting, for similar costs of scenarios, so scenario 1 versus scenario 2, for similar costs, you're addressing a host of other issues that village facilities have. I summarized them You know, briefly here, you can use your imagination on some of it, but I went through scenario one, which is doing the two projects separate, theater entrance and expansion, what the pros are. You wouldn't need to acquire any more property. You wouldn't be moving all your village offices around. You're still going to create an indoor shooting range. Some of the cons are you'd be adding on to this building, which is an historic building. Now, I don't know that that's an easy and cheap option to add on to this building. You'll be building on school property, which wasn't a done deal at the time. We'd have to make a deal with the school. We would not be addressing ADA issues, and we wouldn't be addressing any of the justice court issues. And obviously, scenario two, you know, gets you a host of additional benefits that are listed here. I think, you know, and some of the ones, especially this one down here at the bottom, is a very broad statement, but there are a number of cost efficiencies that you would achieve by having some of the offices consolidated. Right now, we have fully separate networks in this building and the recreation center, and even DPW for that matter. There'd be savings by combining and consolidating. Even sharing staff amongst departments, you'd have greater flexibility to not to say that it's an automatic reduction of staff, don't get me wrong, but you would have the flexibility to move staff around as the need arises, where you don't have that right now amongst the buildings. So there's a few efficiencies like that would come into play, even down to copy machines. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons.
It's everything from the little to the big.
Yeah.
The thought of if all the clerks were in one office and we didn't reduce staff, you automatically cross-train just by being in the same room. When one's on vacation, services to the village would be better. Right now, that's a very large deficiency we have. We're missing one person. You know, some work's not getting done. Bringing the DPW and giving them support staff, and now knowing what they're doing in the same office is good for public service. So there's a lot of those, and they're very little, but they're very big as far as getting a better service without spending more money.
So that's really the whole picture here. I mean, I don't want to, I know you asked about the police department. I think that if you pursue plans phase 1A and 1B, I think there can be a phase 2 that involves the police department, but that's way down the road.
That would be where, to that expanded space or not?
No, it would need to go beyond that.
It's with the DPW.
No, yeah,
Rec center.
I was thinking the same thing.
The requirement of square footage doesn't fit with both acquisitions. They would have to have 2 floors of the 2 acquisitions to meet the minimum needs that they need. And that would just be minimum needs. They need more than that.
Right.
It truly is a square foot problem. Would be great to put them over there with the fire department and just, yes, but it doesn't. There's not a square footage.
but it leaves you with the flexibility to consider options like that in the future. I mean, we're talking this, you know, this is probably 10 years down the road that you'd be thinking about this, but the options would be there.
I mean, absolutely, I think there's a ton to process, digest, think about. But I think that the plan presented is, you know, again, I don't see any extravagance in it. You know, like it's not, you know, there's no, you know, rooms made out of gold or anything. So to me, it's like it's a plan that addresses a longstanding need. I think we have to all think about how it's expensive. Wish they had done it in 1936, would have been a lot cheaper. But you know, I think we have to think about, you know, the idea of a referendum or not a referendum. You know, how much, you know, grant money we think we can get, how much, you know, fund balance we can use. There's a lot of moving parts on the budget side, but as I said earlier, you know, in my passion speech in favor, that, you know, I think this is the time that we have to kind of commit to this and figure out how to make it happen. I mean, obviously we put it to a referendum and the rest of the village says no, that's a different story, but I'm confident that we can
show them the need and show them that this is a reasonable way to address that need. And the fact that we've been working on it, directly for almost 15 years, to me shows that this isn't like, a plan we came up with last week and just threw it out there and haven't thought it through. I mean, I think we've painstakingly thought it through. How many hours has the fire department worked on this? How many hours have you and Ed worked on this? This isn't something that we're obviously not taking this lightly, because we know it's the biggest project in the village's history, but it's probably worthy of that distinction, I think. Obviously we don't have to make any decisions tonight. I think this was a really great kickoff, but I also think that this isn't something we want to sit on and, think about it for another year. I think we want to kind of move rather quickly, and I'm not even exactly clear what our next steps are.
Yeah, I can outline that for you. So
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
The police, I mean, just thinking about the totality of sort of infrastructure projects, what's the square footage of the police department? Does anyone know that?
I don't have that with me now.
No.
We have some, actually, there have been studies done over the years, and I can share them with Larry, with drawings of using the space for the police department. There's been studies over the years.
Using this space?
Using here, you mean?
Yeah.
This is exactly what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
We
would
could
be
in jail.
curious to
That'd be
know
the chief's office.
for the police department, what's their square footage?
Right. Yep, we could find that out.
So the
So-
other thing is, obviously, that debt service tax implication model would have to be extended in order to C1B, right?
Oh, sure.
Because
Yeah.
it's not like you can really serialize it, you're still building the same building. Right, it's not like you can do phase 1A stop. I mean, or is it?
No, I think you can.
Ed, you just said the opposite. You said it has to
So
be.
you can build 1A and then 5 years later build 1B, it's gonna cost 6 times more.
Okay.
Not 6 times, maybe 3 times more, because you now have the exterior wall twice.
Mhm.
You now have a lot of the construction
Right, so
elements.
my sense
You
of
have
it is,
demolition that you didn't have when you were building it.
my sense of it is
You have
you
a
go
finish
all
that you're
in.
taking down.
You go all in for the entire footprint, or you don't,
It's designed for both. If you go with 1B now, there's some changes we want to make to 1A. But if there's no, if you guys go with 1B, you have a little bit more design work to do. But if you don't, 1A can be, you can do 1B later, or 1B and 2 later, or 1B and 3 later. However you want to, however long you want to spend money.
So next steps, Larry?
Yeah, so I mean, just from a broad sense, the next step, aside from coming to grips with whether you want to go forward with any aspect or all aspects of this project, if you were to make that decision and decide that you want to go forward, the first step would be to adopt a bond resolution. You would adopt a resolution that authorizes the borrowing of the funds. You then have an option. You can either allow it to go forward and become effective on its own, which means that you wouldn't be hearing from the public on it. The public can petition against that bond resolution and force it to go to a referendum, which is a mandatory vote, public vote. Or you can choose on your own motion to make it go to mandatory referendum. And I've heard that referenced a few times tonight, so that's certainly one of the options as well.
So how does a referendum work?
It either gets approved by the voters or it doesn't.
Does it have to happen during a normal election cycle or process? Or does it-
No, in fact, I don't think it even could at this point. We wouldn't have hit the ballot at this point.
We have to wait for the next November.
No.
Well,
No, we would have to,
I'm
no, we would,
asking 'cause
we would have to conduct, and I'll find out the details, exact details of the referendum, but we would have to conduct our own special election.
See, I would imagine that the wording would need to be.
You would approve the
Which-
wording, I believe.
Right, right, and whether it would be 1A, 1B, or dollar, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, no,
We'll
all
have to
that
figure
would have to get figured out. Yeah.
So here's my question though, since these are still soft costs, right, in the sense of they're not nailed down any. wouldn't the first step be to undertake a design? I mean, otherwise you're coming with, I mean, my thought is you could start with a design. I mean, sure, you invest a certain amount of money in it, but in the overall scope of things, we're talking about, it's 5% of the building cost if you do a little bit more, but if you do the whole thing.
Right.
So
The first $1 million, that's going to be the engineering or whatever, not eight or
Whatever the number
whatever
is,
that
yeah,
number is.
yeah.
right, and to me, I would think
Architecture.
then you could come and say, look, we know how much, we're pretty sure how much it's gonna cost, but right now, it's kind of a little bit of hand waving,
Right.
the real costs aren't there. And as a resident, I'd be concerned that we were approving it on that basis.
And
Right.
that's sort of what we discussed during the budget hearing in terms of, putting that off at least until the board had a grip, and certainly we
Right.
may want more information.
Right, so
But,
the,
I was thinking a little more along the lines of what Mark was thinking, to really get.
which is totally
our
fine.
thoughts.
It's all what you're comfortable with. So, there's two ways to look at it. If you authorize, let's say you proceed with, for round numbers, $1 million bond resolution, just $1 million to fund the design and engineering. You would then end up here a year from now, let's say, with a better cost estimate. Yes, that's true. But the flip side of it is you've now spent $1 million that could go down based upon a referendum for the rest of it and essentially be wasted.
Well, no, I don't think it's wasted, because you've given the public a real strong model and a cost, you've got the design pretty well knocked out. You can show people where the different facilities are gonna be, more than the concept.
Mhm.
You got some real pricing. In other words, you're giving them a complete deck of cards effectively. So to me, that's a value, because I think if I was a risk averse, or just, some of the other typical residents aren't paying attention to a lot of stuff. And they don't know the needs, and they don't know this and that, and it's always being done on summer vacation when no one's paying attention, whatever. So to put together something that's one step further to concrete, I think, in my mind, would make it a much easier sell to the community at large.
Larry, are you implying it would take a year to do the design study?
I mean,
Well, yeah, that's what
we'd
I'm
have to,
saying.
we'd have to regroup.
60%.
We'd have to regroup and at least get this, we probably need to get to 60% plans. It's probably less than a year, so maybe that was a little bit overstated, but I think it's not a couple of months, I know that.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
I guess my concern is not necessarily that it's like money down the drain, but if we're talking soft costs versus, like, let's say, as a board, would we be comfortable with $16 million? Would we be comfortable with $32 million, right? If that's what it is.
Right.
I think those are different numbers. And I guess I'm still lost on the B part, because we haven't acquired that other piece of property. So how, what you're saying, which is, it makes a big difference if you're doing A and B together, but we don't control this other piece. So I guess I'm still concerned about that other piece of property and the ability to acquire it, because let's say we don't acquire it, then we're talking about just 1A. And 10x later, and for
Right.
B.
Right. I mean, I don't think we would be talking so confidently about 1B if I didn't think we were confident in our ability to acquire it. So,
Right, and that reality could happen during the time of a increased study that
Right.
gave more detailed information.
Yeah.
Again, my concern is that, if, and I think I'm leaning towards having the public, have significant involvement, up to a referendum.
Mhm.
The more information we can give them and the more definite numbers that we can give, we're going to go such a long way to a positive view of the project. It'll stop people from saying, how do we know it's 16 million and not 32 million? And we'll say, well, now we know because we've got studies. I just think it'll give a lot more information. I know it's putting a lot of money up front to get that done.
Right.
But as, you know, as Mark said before, we're talking about a small percentage of this big project, and you know, perhaps we fund that money out of,
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking.
right, not do a bond for that, but we fund that study money.
The other good thing is, sorry.
So that's
I was just gonna say that if we do that, we can also like move more quickly, you know, as opposed to having to do the whole referendum for, you know, that whole, you know, if we say, hey, let's just start on the plans, you know, as soon as we can get the professionals' time lined up, we can start on it. And, you know, I think I actually think that's probably a better way. I think what we're saying is, you know, I haven't heard anyone say anything different. We're very interested in the overall project. So I'd say both 1A and 1B potentially, but we need the real hard information before we can do that. So I think we're saying we're willing to almost risk the startup costs to see the project through.
and get us closer to more grant, you know, potential
Yeah.
grant money by having, again, shovel ready.
It's all part of the clearer picture, I think.
I think one way to look at it also is like an investment, you know, in other words, like it improves the chances of success, right? Think about with a voter. If we come to them and say, here's the plan, we've done all this work and this is what it is, versus coming in with less of a plan and saying, well, this is what we might do, what is gonna have a better chance of winning? So it's like almost like running ads in an election, you know what I mean? Where, but it's much better than that, because first of all, it's useful if we go forward. And second of all, it really is substantive. It shows that we're not messing around here. This, we know what we're talking about. This is what it is. Vote for it if you want it, and if you don't, you don't. But at least we put our best foot forward, right?
So I'd have two caveats or two concerns, one of which is that they're totally, I don't know how to, I can't group them together, but so I'll go each one linearly. So the first one is, I'm really surprised that the footprint of the potential building for the second acquisition would actually be enough to hold all of the village offices and the justice court. And, you know, because it's just, it's, you know, it's like, I've been in that building, I know how big it is. So,
It's 3 stories, 80 feet by 28 feet.
Yeah.
So the basement would be recreation and all their
oh,
stores.
so you're gonna make
They're
use
used
of,
to being in the
because it's 3 stories plus. a
They'll
basement.
enter
And it would be bigger than
from
the
the main
footprint.
entrance.
Yeah.
This is all conceptual in my head, so we haven't been authorized to spend money
Or think about it, no.
on it yet. I'm thinking about it for free. And they have a side entrance on the ambulance corps property because the
Depending on
fire
what he's doing.
department's in and out a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
First floor, which would be the main entrance, would be all courtroom, 2 offices in the front, a courtroom, 2 offices in
Right.
the back. We have to do a little stair work, reel under the stair. And then the 3rd floor would be all the administrative offices. It would be and both of them have lobbies. So basically, we want to continue that lobby that you saw
by
on
3rd
1A,
floor, you're saying,
straight across.
is that building only minus, it's basement plus 3 floors now, or is it basement plus 2 floors now?
Basement plus 2 floors.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
oh no, that basement's gone. We're gonna knock that building down, we're just gonna bring the building over.
Yeah, yeah, I understand
So
that,
if you bring up the elevation, it's gonna go straight across.
right, so you,
Right. So, and then the 3rd floor would be lobby,
okay, so let me get to my,
staff, and then 6 offices.
so I'd be a lot happier to see even a conceptual sketch of that, just to see that it's rational.
We need the author, yeah, we'll need an authorization. but
Yeah, we'll,
You know,
we'll be
We'll
talking.
send it, we'll have it for the next day.
But the next thing I wanted to say, and this is something from being involved in this kind of thing on both sides of the counter, the DS, is that we have to be very careful about how we go forward to present it in public, meaning that we can't have just a conceptual illustration of what it might look like. That is going to be, in every project I've seen that gets the village residents really worked up, including the plans for the condo apartments in the waterfront district.
Mhm.
You know, it was some of those renderings that were just, well, this is just sort of conceptual. It was a rendering of the corner parking lot building that people went apoplectic over it, and for good reason. So we have to be very careful to make sure that enough money is spent to get something beyond just a conceptual rendering, but something that really is going to get people to go, yeah, that looks good. Not like, you know, waving your hands, this is sort of what it might be like. That's where several projects in the past, I think, have really hit the shoals.
So I envision.
Not village projects, but,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
No, I envision that being a committee of residents once we get the floor plans done, so we know where the principal
Yeah.
units have to be, to have a group that the board picks to help with that design. We didn't want to get into the design because
I'm just
conceptually,
saying-
right at this point, conceptual
Yeah.
is where we have to be.
I agree with
That's
that.
my vision to move the elevations. Once we get direction from you on 1A and 1B, then we can get a committee together of your choice and show them what we have.
All I'm saying is don't have the referendum before we have a really strong design or set of design candidates, because that's going to be target for all the torpedoes.
No, agreed. But it's been our concern
Yeah.
all along,
We hesitated even showing you the massing tonight,
but it was important.
but I think at this stage, it would have looked awkward not even seeing anything of
No, I
any
think it's
elevation,
fine.
you know what I mean?
But
I
it
mean-
does look like a, it's like when we see conceptual designs for certain things in zoning, and then people, the residents, I heard on Monday night, the residents referred to it as, basically German architecture, or not German, it was Soviet architecture.
Soviet architecture.
And it was just really a massing concept.
Right.
Whereas certainly the designs that were presented later were much more evolved and weren't like block barracks. They were actually very highly articulated kind of townhouse nuanced structures.
Yeah.
So I think you buy a lot more to go in that direction.
Makes sense.
Well,
Anything else? Well, listen, the feedback that we just got was tremendous, so thank you for that. We have some really good direction to go on, I think, and we'll be able to get back to you soon on this, I think.
Well, I think we should also just go back and say, thank you guys, everyone, for pulling together. This is a lot farther along than I thought it was, and it seems a lot less questions in my mind in terms of the functional fit and the benefits. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
All right.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Don't we have to vote on that?
Discussion.